How are you doing? Thanks for joining me. Finally got connected, and I wanted to have you on the podcast. We met virtually and we're based in Portland. We never met in person yet, but hopefully someday. I want to hear a little bit more about your background on process improvement and healthcare, government work.
Yeah, so hello everybody. My name is Sarah Cook and I'm a Lean Six Sigma black belt. Currently, I'm a consultant, but it took a long road to get here. So I started out in the clinical laboratory setting at the VA Medical Center in Portland, Oregon. And I worked in the microbiology and molecular science department for almost 9 years. And my family and I just out of nowhere decided we'd move to South Dakota where we had some friends. So we moved to Rapid City. But I had a great opportunity and I started working specifically in quality and safety in the clinical laboratory that was there. And that's around the time I was introduced to lean and process improvement. And eventually I started doing that work full time as a performance engineer for the healthcare system there. So we stayed in South Dakota for about 7 years. We always wanted to come back to Portland. We had lived here previously. And I decided I'd get into consulting for a variety of reasons. So I'm now a consultant at Pepper Foster Consulting in Portland, Oregon.
Okay, very cool. So did you always have an interest in science and going down the microbiology route?
It's crazy to end up here. I thought for sure I'd be in testing laboratories for the rest of my life or doing microbiology, molecular science for the rest of my life. And I really enjoyed that work. I definitely apply that scientific thinking and mindset to the work that I do now. But I was in healthcare, and around the time COVID happened, I was pretty sure I wanted to break into something different and pivot my career a little bit. And I really did.
Did you get involved with a lot of stuff around COVID? Was that heavy into that, or were you doing something different?
Yeah, so because all healthcare systems, I should say, were developing new processes, so new everything really. And COVID was hot. We were creating new processes to get people vaccinated, get test results, drive-through testing, all kinds of things. And all of that was starting from scratch based on the urgency and expediency to get test results. And so it was a great time to have people that knew process improvement, and it also broke down a lot of silos, it was probably my favorite part out of all of it. It was a lot of urgency and sometimes chaos, but all those departments working together and synchronizing was pretty incredible to watch.
I think that's something else that was really cool was, wow, we can actually get things done pretty quick when everyone's motivated to change. Suddenly things that would have taken years to get done. So yeah, I think that's encouraging that change doesn't have to take a long time. It's just really a priority and a focus and urgency around it.
Absolutely.
And I think that lowering the barriers, oh, we got to triple check this first versus we don't have time. We have to get something up and running. That's, I think hopefully broke down some barriers going forward with other changes people want to make. I don't know what exactly got you started. Was it a class you went to, or was it part of an event or something you seeked out?
Yeah, I think one of the great things about lean is that I think a lot of us are practicing lean, but we don't realize it. And so when I was doing quality and safety in my role in the clinical laboratory, I was interested in all of the cause and effects of all the processes that were happening in our little bubble of the laboratory. And I think when I started to get exposed to talking with people and just talking through processes that weren't working and they weren't serving the people doing them, someone mentioned lean. And I was like, what is this thing? And then when I learned about it, it was like the clouds parted. And I was like, this all makes sense. And so then I was like, hit the ground running, learning everything I could and trying to apply as much as I could to my role. And then that drove me into the role next after the quality and safety part of doing that process improvement, performance engineer work. And then that also opened the gates of being exposed to all the different parts of healthcare, like billing, surgery, patient experience, and all the things. And I was able to practice out there and learn how to apply it in those different environments and different people and departments.
So did you get tied in with Lean first, or did you get some Six Sigma with the quality background? Because usually that's most people in quality start Six Sigma route, including myself.
Yeah, I think that probably would have made more sense. But I think when industries are just starting out with process improvement, lean is easier to apply than Six Sigma. In some cases, Six Sigma would be great, but maybe those teams aren't collecting data. Maybe they're not collecting the right data. They're just collecting the data that they've always collected, but they're not sure what they're going to do with it. So in those cases, it's building blocks. So I like to start out with lean, and that's what I did. With my science background, Six Sigma was definitely more appealing to some extent, but starting out with lean and those principles and those building blocks, I felt like that was an easier introduction for people than Six Sigma was. I think I learned about lean and Six Sigma in parallel.
Okay.
And while I was actually applying lean, I was teaching myself Six Sigma, taking the classes, doing all the things, and then moving up with different belts and certifications, and stopped at Lean Sigma, Six Sigma Black Belt. But I always found it that it made more sense for me to apply mostly lean tools and techniques than it did Six Sigma in many of the different projects and efforts that I was involved in.
I'd agree. I think that's a lot easier to learn those lean methods first and then build up experience of process improvement and
Yep.
change, and then get to the point where you start doing a little bit more analytics. Maybe there's a
Yeah.
lot of low hanging fruit, to use that phrase, as well. So you can clear out some of that, get some
Yeah.
stability, get some visuals, understanding what's going on, and then bring in a little more complexity once you're gonna clear out some of the easy stuff. There's always side projects that happen. People go through a Six Sigma training and they need to do a project and they work on something, but the organization maybe is not ready for that, but an individual can be in their department. But yeah, I think
Totally
that's a good way to
agree.
do it.
Yeah, and I think that working with teams to make process changes, which that's what you're doing, right? You're looking at it from a process improvement perspective, but it's a change. That's how it's going to be viewed, at least initially. So when you have data that a team is collecting, it's amazing and it's so helpful because you're not coming in to say, hey, your process isn't going that great. That's why I'm here. It's you're showing the data and you're being as objective as you possibly can, and you're just presenting the data. The data isn't bias. Hopefully it's not bias, but it's an objective perspective to say, this is what's happening, good or bad, but this kind of shows us where we can start.
You're right. Take some of the emotion out, bring some visibility to problems that maybe they feel or don't realize.
Right.
Sometimes it confirms what they know. Sometimes it shows them something they don't realize or hadn't noticed before. And then I think the key thing is just there's feedback on whether things are working better because we have the data to compare. Sometimes I see there's a lot of actions to improve, not a lot of verifying that it worked. And not that we have to verify every single thing we do, but after a while, it's like, hey, is all this actually making a difference? Are we getting faster times? Are we seeing better quality? Are we reducing harm? If it's not, then we're doing a lot of stuff and it's not getting what we want. So we need that data. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And it needs to be a combination of perspective and data to some extent, because I'll see great numbers, the team will see great numbers, but they're trying to continue a process that isn't sustainable for them. They're working extra hours, they're doing far more than they were doing before, and it's not efficient for them to take breaks and things like that. So the data is coming out amazing, right? Turnaround times look amazing, all of that, the numbers look great, but it isn't sustainable. It's not going to last. So we need to adjust our expectations and what's people are doing this work. So we have to go back to that. What's
Yeah.
actually achievable?
No, that's a good point. And that's even when you see the improvement like that, if you don't notice the overexertion and the fact that they've dropped everything else to get the results, and now everything else is behind, it's no turnaround time. And now you're just like
Yep.
whack-a-mole because it's not fixing the real issue or taking the
Yep.
waste out. Yeah, caution for people that the initial positive data results doesn't mean that's gonna hold up in the long run.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. You mentioned the work in healthcare, some clinical and also non-clinical, getting into some of the office process, back-end processes. Any examples or things you remember or want to share with projects that you felt were
Yeah.
interesting, either side of that?
Yeah, definitely. One of the benefits of having a role that functioned across an entire healthcare system was that I was in a variety of different departments and areas and working with a lot of different people. So I would do a lot of little projects, bigger efforts, but so these are just the ones that I feel like I'm probably most proud of.
Yeah.
One project that I worked on was to decrease surgical site infection rates for certain surgical procedures. And that was amazing. I love that work a lot. Also, a very small team and I created a grassroots lean training so that we could we're going to these different teams and we're introducing lean principles and tools. Wouldn't it be helpful to bring people in and say, hey, would you want to learn about some of this so that you can help sustain these efforts that we're working on and you can drive some of these things. We don't necessarily need to come in. You'll have that mindset and the tools that you can sustain what we've come in to do. And so I was really proud of that. We had great turnouts. We had leaders, we had frontline workers, we had a great variety coming in that wanted to learn those different things. So that was amazing. Mentioned earlier the COVID vaccination and test procedures. That was awesome. The healthcare system that I was at, they implemented daily tiered huddles while I was there. And that was a great collaborative process. And a lot of great outcomes came out of that. Also, a lot of opportunities for improvement and putting eyes on different areas of the healthcare system that may not have been getting noticed as much before and being able to bring them up to the front and listen to what they're dealing with. So that was awesome. One of the first process improvements that I did was a lean management board. And that was probably one of my favorite efforts because I fell flat on my face and made all kinds of mistakes, but I learned a lot just in that one effort that I'm so glad I was able to learn it as early on in my lean career because I would have struggled so much. And I have my challenges, I still do, but I was very grateful to learn as much as I did just in that effort. And I kept it within the clinical laboratory that I was in. I had a lot of people around me that I was working with at the time that gave me a lot of feedback and support, which was great. And then Gemba walks, of course, love Gemba walks and just hanging out with leaders who are trying to be great leaders.
What was the idea around the lean management board? Trying to envision what that would look like.
I read all the books and I thought I knew so much. I had been reading about lean. I knew all the things, right? I thought I could come in and get signed off by the leaders and say, hey, this is what I think might help. It was my idea. And I felt so ready. So I was like doing this timeline. This is what we're going to do. This is what it's going to look like, the structure. And then when it went live, no one cared. It's not that they didn't care. It's that I didn't bring them into this. I didn't involve them. I was doing it to them. I was trying to create all the processes. I didn't get their feedback. I didn't loop around with them and say, hey, does this work? Does this make sense? I created a schedule. I decided on the metrics with leadership. That failed really quickly. And I learned a lot.
Yeah, I think that's something we all have to go through because, yeah, it is tempting and it feels like I think I understand this. Let me just put it together. It's quicker. I don't have to bother them. I think there's good intent behind this, but then you learn like it's a waste of time if you're not pulling them into that discussion. It's going to go nowhere. It's going to be harder, and it's going to be wrong because you really don't know what they need or what their challenges are, or what they're dealing with, or how to get them ready to embrace something like that. You get the knowledge and you're excited. I can do this better. I know how to set this up. Yes, that's true. Your answer would have worked if they bought into it, but why would they buy into it? They don't know what you're talking about.
It's so true. And I think it's not just coming back and saying, okay, I made these mistakes. It's that I didn't realize that I had lost the trust of the people doing the work. And I thought I could just bounce right back and say, okay, let me set up these meetings with everyone and figure this out. No, I had to earn their trust back. And that takes time. But if you go from there and you build trust, things will go much, much smoother if you actually care about working with them and not doing anything to them.
Yeah. I think that's the hard part too, is feeling like I want to bring value, I want to solve problems, I want to fix something, I want to save money, but I have to do it in a way that they come along with me and I don't ruin that trust and I go at the pace they're ready for. And those conflict. And it's hard to
So true.
say, let's just skip to the end, or let me just do this and put it in. And if you just follow it, it'll be fine. And that, I think that's a constant conflict we have to battle. And that's where you learn, like, it's pointless to skip over this. I just have to let it take a little bit of longer time because I know it's going to be easier and better.
Yeah, and you're on the outside, you have the blind eyes is what we call it. You don't know anything about anything. You don't know the history, you don't know any of those things. You might see these opportunities right out of the gate, right? You're like, what about this and what about this? And you have to take your time. You can't interrogate people, but I would just come out with all these questions and I'm just like, chill out. This is a lot for them. So have some respect, because a lot of times you're dealing with processes that have been happening for a long time, right? Maybe you're talking with someone who created that process from nothing, right?
Yeah.
You have to back up and have respect for the people doing the work. And that has to lead you through all of it.
Yeah, and that's a good point. Like, this person could have taken a terrible, non-existent process and built a process up that is still inefficient. But to them, it was you should have seen it 3 years ago. This is a beautiful process compared to what it used to be. And you see it as, this is so wasteful still. When you don't see that background, it's hard to.
I've come in with an easel pad and Post-its, and one of the people that was in the room had created that process from nothing. And it was exactly like you said. They came in and they took the time out of their job. They were doing their regular duties and they were trying to make something out of nothing. And they just cried the entire time we were process mapping. And I'm like, do you want to stop? And they're like, just keep going. And just, it's just some of those things, it kind of takes me back a minute. But then I'm like, this is theirs. They created this. I have to have respect for that. Yep, exactly.
What are some other ways to kind of tackle the change management part? What have you found that works? Or what you try to look for, or just things you consider, or what you found helpful when you're doing this?
Yeah, I think before you start any type of lean events, I think it's really important to meet with the people that are involved in the process first and ask them questions about what are your pain points? What are things that you struggle with? And if you're noting all those things, but the real purpose is to build their trust, because at the end of the day, if people can't feel safe with you and build up that psychological safety with you, you're not really going to be able to find that root cause. You could ask all the 5-10 questions you want, but at the end of the day, you need to build their trust. I do an event, do some process mapping, and then while I was taking everything down, that's when people would come in and say, hey, just so you know, when this happens. And I'm just like, yeah, totally. When You do what you got to do to get that trust going. And I think another approach is when you start those different events is to frame it in a way, how did the process fail you? Instead of what are all the things that go wrong here, you say, how did the process fail you? Because the last thing you want to do is tell someone when you made a mistake at your job. When healthcare, especially, I felt a lot of shame when I make mistakes because you could be impacting patient care. It's a horrible feeling. You don't want to tell anyone. You don't want to shine a light on anything that you're doing wrong. You just want to fix it. And so asking the questions about how the process fails, you take some of the burden off of that expert and moves it over to the process where it belongs. And again, until you get to that point where you can build up that psychological safety, it's a lot harder to find the root cause.
Yeah, no, I like that question. I think that's a great way to deflect it away from the person, because that's not what we want. Assuming 99% of the time people are trying to do a good job. We hope that they're just want to perform well, and so the process is to blame. You said something else, psychological safety. When they're talking about an issue, they can tell you everything or they can tell you some of the things. And if they don't have that trust, they're going to give you a surface answer or gloss over some of the details. Or they could say, to be honest, I don't know what I'm doing. Or to be honest, I'm just trying to figure this out. I didn't get trained, or I dropped the ball. I was supposed to check this. I am so busy. There's so many other things I'm not doing. And that's hard for them to speak up and say that, but that's how we can actually solve it, is we can get to the real issue, the root cause. It just seems like it takes us offline in this different direction. We waste a bunch of time when we can't have those truthful, honest conversations. And you're right. Why would they divulge that? They don't know what you're going to do with this information. They don't know you. We have to build that trust and not ruin it. And so that's hard too, to want to tell other people about the problems that you heard, and then they ruin that trust by sharing it with the wrong person who takes that knowledge and does something badly with it. I heard this 100%. Person doesn't know what they're doing. It's like, now this is all falling apart.
It's so true. I think one of the mistakes that I made in the clinical laboratory is people would have similar, two patients with specimens would come in at the same time, and they'd both have the same first name, they'd have a similar last name, but the only difference would be their social. And that was one of the first mistakes that I made. And I just sat there while I was working with the specimen, I was like, oh my gosh. And I second guessed myself and I was worried. And I'm just thinking to myself, has anyone else made the same mistake? What do they do? But it's not something I'd say, hey, everyone, look over here. I made a mistake and I'm trying to, what do you guys do? Everything is quiet and like, just fix it, move on. We've all done it, right? And then everyone's telling you like, oh, we've all done that. We're trying to just fix it. This is how you can do that. But there's a lot of shame around it. You don't want anyone to know.
Yeah, and it doesn't, especially in healthcare where it feels like you may have someone's life in your hands. And but I see that at a factory job, something that would be less critical, that still the same fear or shame comes up too. And it's, I don't want to get in trouble. I don't want to get yelled at, or I don't want to lose my job or get written up, or whatever consequences they fear or suspect. That's going to change how you act, and gets into a protective approach or a cover up thing. And then now we don't see the data and we don't get to the root cause, and it makes it so much more challenging.
Right. And the data that you're seeing, you're believing, right?
Right.
And we can't go on thinking all processes are perfect 100% of the time. We have to acknowledge that things are maybe breaking down. So when you're getting all the data and you love it and it looks great, how much do you trust it? Because maybe you just haven't built that trust with the team. So you can have great data. You also have to take it with a grain of salt if you're not hearing all the things sometimes.
Yeah, I had a recent experience where someone said, if I know I'm not going to meet my numbers, I'm not going to try that hard. I'm going to slack off. At first, someone might be like, oh my gosh, this person's admitting that they're being lazy during the day. And I was like, this is a good sign. I was actually very encouraged to hear that they felt comfortable sharing, like, hey, this is honestly how I act. When things are so broken in the process, I'm not motivated anymore. And
Yep.
they're honest about it. And I was like, I can work with this. That honesty and that truthfulness about it, I can build on that. When it's like,
Yes.
oh, I tried my best, and then we're never really getting to the heart of the issue again. So I
Right.
was so encouraged to hear them admit that I'm not trying because I'm
Yep.
really demotivated right now. Okay,
No.
this is why we need to fix these problems so you're not demotivated as much. And so it was really, I think, shocking for others to hear, but I was like, this is a good sign. This is actually really positive.
Yes. And I think it's great to take that information and react that way because I think it gives people they're able to see, hey, this person's not taking this information and compromising my job, right?
Yep.
They're
Right.
seeing, okay, this is somewhere we can actually start from. Okay, let's go from here. And we don't dwell on it. We're not saying, did you not get enough sleep that night? Do you always do this, right? You're
Right.
not blaming the person. It's not the person, it's the process. What's going wrong in this process that brings you to this point that happens here? So I think that's trust is everything when you're doing process improvement.
In healthcare, are you seeing applications of risk mitigation or proactive work? I know that's a big challenge is we can fix first, can we get the organization to fix their current problems and see the problems? But to get them to step back and then be more proactive, that's a whole nother level of difficulty. And I don't know if you've had much luck or success in doing some more proactive or risk mitigation type activities.
Yeah, I think when I was doing work with surgical site infection rates, there was an effort to do some proactive activities. I think looking for something early on in the process that might create dominoes, right, for the rest of the processes that follow. One might be doing that surgical timeout, right? And looking to make sure that these different processes are happening. And when they're not happening, how is that rolling and trickling down to the rest of the process? So I think we're always looking at the process from the very beginning and looking to see if each of those steps are happening. And if those steps didn't happen, what was the impact of that? So the first thing that came to mind was the timeout, because we would see a pattern where if a timeout was very expedited, or maybe a timeout had not been checked that it happened. And in healthcare, if you didn't document it, it didn't happen. So you have to make the assumption that it didn't actually occur. So you're going through and just looking to see if those steps, you're viewing them as being proactive for the remainder, because what you're really looking at is, did they get a surgical site infection or not? So you're looking at all the things that happened before, something like that.
How to get that woven into the process is challenging. We can fix problems, but it's like trying to coordinate a team to talk through stuff and say, what can we do to avoid this from happening? We don't have
Right.
time for that, but we'll have a meeting to talk about what did go wrong. And it's a part of Six Sigma. It's not as strong of a part of Lean, but I think the standard work elements, there's things in mistake proofing and things that are there to stop issues. But as far as like proactive stuff, the huddles, the engagement
Yep.
systems, the huddles are good. Talking through what can go wrong. Here's our plan today. We're short staffed. What do we need to do to make sure we have as good a day as possible, given that we're
Yeah.
overwhelmed or we have too much demand or the network's down, systems aren't working. We still want to provide good care. What do we need to do?
Right. And in
It's a
some of these
challenge.
cases, the patients have been waiting 4 to 6 weeks to get a procedure, and all of these procedures are stacked up against each other. So you want to take time to do a timeout, to walk through everything about that patient in the beginning, do that standard work, but you also only have that room for so long before you have to go over to another procedure and then go to, right? So if that one goes over, all the other ones go over. So there's a lot of pressure, I think, especially during or after COVID, and we brought back elective procedures again. Those had all been stacked up for a long time. Patients are waiting, right? And so you're trying to get patients in and you're trying to meet that demand, but you're also trying to make sure that you follow the processes, because what we've seen is that when you skip any of these processes from the very beginning, that sometimes they do have a domino effect to all the other things that happen after that. So sometimes I think a process like a timeout can be dismissed, but it's critical and it's part of standard work and it's there for a reason. So you have to make sure that people know the value in that.
Yeah, and I can imagine that the culture and the psychological safety is critical for that to work.
Because let's say you start a procedure, right? And the surgeons, they're about to go and there hasn't been a timeout. And there's someone in the room that's, hey, did anyone notice do you want to put your hand up and say, hey, everyone stop what you're doing? We didn't have a timeout. That takes a lot of courage, right? To say, hey, stop. But that's what we ask of these caregivers, to do those things and advocate for the patient and the process. But it's hard work to do something like that. It takes a lot.
Right? Especially if you have concerns that the reaction's not going to be very positive. If you don't
Absolutely.
have that safety, it's really courageous at that point.
Exactly.
So all these things all tie together. Yeah, it's really, really critical. Yeah, it's proactive and change management and psychological safety. And
Mhm.
those aren't necessarily value stream mapping tools and Kanbans and stuff, but that's like the outer edges of the process that have to be there to make those tools work the way they're
Right.
supposed to with the people who are engaged in that process.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think everyone goes through this, right? It's to learn tools, and the tools are pretty cool. And then you realize, oh, the tools are a part of it, but
Hmm.
all this other stuff is actually the most critical things, and that's the more difficult things. Developing
Yeah.
the leadership, changing the leadership, getting them on board, creating that safety. It's not easy.
No. And even I think you can never underestimate what's viewed as a small improvement, right? Like quick wins, those can really mean they can be challenging for someone that's just trying to get through their job every day. But it could also mean that someone gets a lunch break when they typically don't, right? So it's important to understand that even something small that feels really insignificant, and you're thinking, I don't want to bother with these small improvements. I want to do the big things, right? I want to do patient experience for 3 departments and all these things, but don't minimize or dismiss smaller efforts, because that could be also a really great way to get people on board and really see what lean can do.
Yeah, and I think your lean training that you talked about was a great way that you'll never understand the improvements that came out of that. There's lots of small things. I can leave 15 minutes early today. I can get home a little earlier than normal. I can not be frustrated today. They could have made some improvement just from basic training and support like that. That's not going to get written up or documented.
All of our team, I think at one point or another, we would just think, let's work ourselves out of a job. We can come in and we can help with these process improvements, but the end game was always to have people identify those in their areas themselves and start looking for those ways that they can make those improvements and identify those ways and add value. It means a lot to set people up that way and be able to watch sustainment, because they invested the time to be able to learn all those things. So it's pretty incredible.
Anything else around employee engagement that you've seen work well? You've said the huddles, you talked about some basic training, encourage small improvements. Anything else?
My job is just to encourage people to come to me and tell me what they're comfortable sharing, and using that information in a way that I think helps them instead of scares them. right? In some cases, like we mentioned earlier, you're bringing really sensitive things to the surface that maybe everyone knew and knows, but no one would want to share publicly, right? So just, I think understanding that you're asking people to take a big leap of faith with you. And so your job really is to create that environment where they can be safe. Like you said earlier, where someone said, if I know I'm not going to meet my goal, I'm not going to try as hard. Now you have somewhere to start from. Now, what your current state is and what you're looking at. Without that kind of information, you're guessing.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and I think even just understanding the opportunity that's there, it says if we can just take some of these problems away off their plate, not frustrate them so much, we can get much better productivity and they're going to be happier. And that's really what we're trying to do.
Yeah,
Just
they're
make
going to get their lunch
people's
break.
work.
I had someone pull me aside and they were look, I don't know what you're doing. Okay. I'm not sure if I'm on board with this process improvement or not. Can you please make sure that out of all of this, I can get my lunch break? And I'm like, okay, let's go. Let's try and make it happen. You have to bring in that trust and create that environment to do it.
Oh, and just listening for what's important to them and not asking for, I need this automated or to make it so easy for me. I just want to focus on what I'm here for and take away this frustration and things that keep me from doing the work. I like the work, but I can't get to the work because of all this process problems.
And if you are collecting data, understand that data fluctuates. It's normal. It happens. Try your best not to react if something goes up 0.5%, because numbers do that. They move around. Things change every day. Something could have happened. Mark Graben, he's done a lot of writing about when to react to data, when not to, or try not to. And I think that's something too, when you're looking at data, you want to put all your faith and look at it and think that's exactly what's happening. Something is out of range because it didn't meet your standard or it didn't stay in the green. It could have been anything, that people didn't necessarily do anything wrong. A process didn't break down. The process just moves and fluctuates in different ways. So don't panic. It happens.
The number is always going to go up or down, right? It's not going to stay the same. So the question is, does it move in a way that's unusually large or unusually different than what it used to? That's what we want to really get worried about. But
teams would do turnaround times and length of stay. And as soon as something turned red, it was like, hey, what happened here? And if I were working in those departments and someone's, hey, I need to know what happened here, I'm going to be like, whoa, I don't know. The days seem like any other day, right? And so you just have to calculate those ranges that you're willing to say, all right, this is how much we're going to fluctuate, and try and work with that before reacting.
Yeah, I think that is something that was really helpful on the Six Sigma side, is being able to not react to noise and the fluctuations in data, looking at the process behavior charts or control charts and SPC to say, don't worry about that one. It's actually going to fluctuate a certain amount. I think if you talk to people in that process, they would probably back it up without seeing the data. They would say, this seems like every other day. I don't know what's so unusual or special about this situation. So what are we reacting or freaking out about?
Yeah. And I think meeting people where they are with the data. I've met with different teams, clients, where they had really intricate standard deviations and all the things and all this stuff printed out from Minitab. You can just draw some lines, make it easy for people to interpret at a glance. And so that as I'm walking by, I should know exactly what happened with that data today. It doesn't need to be super intricate, just what's going on with it. And so don't think that people need lots of special things. They just want to be able to interpret something on a board. We did a process improvement. Is it working? I don't know.
I get to the visual part of it is, how do I know how we're doing it? Getting some kind of visual chart on their huddle boards or in their area somehow to give feedback. Yeah,
for sure.
Cool. This has been great. Anything else you want to add?
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, I love it. I love talking about this stuff. And so thanks for hanging out on a Friday afternoon.
Of course. Yeah. What else would I be doing? Yeah.
I know.
Talking about process improvement.
Woohoo. That's
How
right.
can people get a hold of you if you want to connect, reach out, learn more about what
Yeah.
you're doing?
Yeah. Just find me on LinkedIn and then
Okay.
message me and we can chat. Lean, data, Six Sigma. I'm all about it.
Are there multiple Sarah Cooks?
There
At the
probably is. So it should be just Lean Six Sigma black belt.
We'll have the link in the
And
notes.
the red hair.
Okay, that'll be easy. Cool. Thanks,
Cool.
Sarah. Appreciate
Thank you
having you
so
on, and
much.
let's stay in touch.